That quarry that's in the east, in the mountains.
In the mountains of...
it's nowhere near the Nile.
Right. And so they would have had...
ground.
You'd have to go up and down mountains to move these things that were tens of tons, like off cliffs. And because like the narrative is like, oh, well, they would have brought these stones up the Nile.
Right.
Well, there's stones out there that are on the other side of the Nile in the mountains. So how did they bring those?
There's enormous stones.
Huge.
Enormous.
Well, there's 1,000-ton stones.
There's evidence. There's multiple statues that I can show you pictures of, that there were single piece statues. So you have the unfinished obelisk in the quarry. That's 1,200 tons. But then you have at least 3 or 4 finished statues that were 1,000 tons, single piece granite. And one of them's in a place called Tanis, which is way up in the north in the Delta. That's more than 1,000 miles from where that stone came from. And then moving that thing, I mean, it was around 1,000 tons finished, single piece granite. So moving it, you may be at 1,500 tons or more, like moving that. There's a quarry in Egypt, I think it's called the Minya quarry, which has these blocks. They're still attached, where they've cut these big blocks out, and there's like an image of what looks like a giant pharaoh that's been carved on top of it. They're made from limestone. Now, maybe they were never intended to be blocks, or maybe they were never intended to be finished, but if you assume they're blocks, these 2 blocks weigh, I think it's 3,500 and 5,000 tons a piece, based on the density of limestone in that region. Like, they're not disconnected, but that's the scale. We know there's objects up to like 1,200 tons, but the fact that they moved them 1,000 miles, and we have examples. There's a stone called the Russian Thunderstone. Have you heard of this?
No.
So like in the 1700s, they took a big lump of, I think it's granite or something like that, from Finland, and they shipped it to St. Petersburg, and they carved it into a statue. It's still there today. It's the Thunderstone. It's an edifice. It weighed... That's it now. Yeah, that's the finished one. This image here is the right one. Yeah. So this is how they did it in the 1700s, the Thunderstone. And they moved it around 100, 150 meters a day. It took them forever. And the only way they did this was by basically sinking giant logs into the ground to give them a leverage point for these capstans. And they'd move a system of rails, big steel rails with steel ball bearings behind it. It weighed about 1,500 tons. And just over a period of just very slow grinding and turning with capstans and pulleys and these steel tracks, they move at about 150 meters a day. It took them forever. And in order to get that thing across the water from Finland, they had to construct a giant barge, like a huge barge. And on each side of the barge, they would tie up 3 warships just to try and keep it stable. It's about the same size, same mass as the obelisk that's sitting in this mountainous quarry in Egypt, in Aswan. It's still in the ground. It's like 1,200 tons of granite. And you're expected to believe that they somehow were going to lift this thing up out of a quarry over these basically big hills and mountains of granite and put it on a little ship that's narrowed in this, they call it the harbor there, and it's this tiny little space. I'm like, you're absolutely delusional if you think this was a simple task that could be achieved with primitive methods, and then ship that thing 1,000 miles somewhere. It's
when you speculate, when you sit around by yourself, because you've thought about this a lot, how the fuck do you think they did this?
Look, I
take a wild
ass guess. I think there's connections possibly to gravity manipulation. I think anti-gravity had to play a part in moving some of this stuff. I actually think there's some connections to some of the work that's being done with this plasmoid implosion technology, the stuff that Randall's been looking into, that's coming back to talk a little bit about. The relationship and the sacred geometry aspects of that are similar to the things that we see in some of these cultures in the past. So that may potentially have something to do with the methods that were used in the past. But I'm convinced it was a form of advanced technology. Now, whether it's our form of technology, because let's face it, we can do things like that today, but it takes hydraulics and diesel powers and cranes and all that stuff. They may have had an entirely different avenue of tech.
9. The simulation hypothesis. What if everything around us is just a simulation? Joe and a guest discuss the possibility that we might be living in a computer-generated reality in this episode. Could we be in the Matrix?
Philip K. Dick, right? And his idea that the universe, what happens is we actually go and we change variables and we rerun it, and we might have the sense that we're rerunning the same scene, we're saying the same things, but something could be different. And usually something is different when you run the simulation. and that's what got me into a whole nother rabbit hole, which I cover in my second book, which is the Mandela effect. I don't know if you've heard about the Mandela effect.
I have, but I don't necessarily totally understand it.
Yeah, well, I kind of dismissed the whole thing earlier, and the Mandela effect is when a small group of people remember something happening differently in the past than what is the majority consensus opinion.
And it's about Mandela being dead, right?
Well, that was the first thing that kind of kicked off this blogger who actually coined the term. I think her name was Fiona Broom. Some people remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s. But of course, he didn't die in prison, right? You can look it up, right? He got out of prison, became president of South Africa, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and died in whatever it was, like more recently, like 2013 or something like that. But the people who remember this, they remember it with just like a whole bunch of specific details, right? His wife, Winnie, spoke at the funeral. There were certain U.S. politicians or presidents there. And so what happened was that was one Mandela effect, if you will. And then there started to be all these other things that people remembered that were different. And some of these were relatively minor things like the spelling of Fruit Loops or
Berenstain Bears.
That's the most famous one, right? The Berenstain Bears, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, in fact, here, we can see it there, right? If you ask people, most people remember it as the Berenstain Bears.
Right.
But when you look at it, it's actually the Berenstain Bears. Okay. It's a relatively small change, but it's one that people are really confused about. Then there's the movies, right? The movie lines, like in Star Wars, did he say, Luke, I am your father? Did Darth Vader actually say that, right? Mm-hmm. And so now I'm not necessarily saying that all of this stuff happens. Like I dismissed a lot of this as just faulty memory. And that's the currently accepted explanation for the Mandela effect is, a bunch of people got it wrong, right? But what you find is that the more significance that something has to you, the less likely you are to get it wrong, right? So if you're Jewish and you asked your parents, why are these bears Jewish, right? And your parents didn't say, oh, it's not really Bernstein, it's Bernstein, right? Mm-hmm. That's proximity to that subject, right? There was a blogger online, I'm forgetting her name now. She was a journalism student in Chicago, and she said she went to South Africa to interview Nelson Mandela in prison and was told that he was too ill. So she literally came back, and then she started working for NPR. And then she says, well, I remember him dying shortly after. Now, if you just went to South Africa to interview Nelson Mandela and then you remember him dying, and that's proximity and significance. You're less likely to get it wrong than just some random guy who just thought Mandela died. Or if you're, heavy duty Christian and you're more likely to memorize certain passages, from the Bible.
Right.
So again, I dismissed it. And then what happened was after I had written the simulation hypothesis about this idea that the whole world is computation, a friend of mine from MIT who was working at Google came to me and said, hey, have you heard the Mandela effect? I was like, yeah, I heard about it, but, a bunch of people remembering, different stuff.
Right.
No big deal. He goes, well, the simulation hypothesis is one of the best explanations for this, that the world is a simulation. Now, I was surprised for two reasons. One, most guys, who work at who are at MIT or Google, they tend to be very left-brained, right? So the Mandela effect is not something that they generally pay attention to, or UFOs or any of this, this kind of weird stuff. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that if you're running a simulation and you go back and you change some variables and you rerun the simulation,
8. MK Ultra and mind control. Joe reveals chilling truths about MK Ultra, the CIA's real experiments with mind control and drugs.
That's his superpower because he's been through it.
You ruined him. His shows, you ruined him. He's so crazy now. He's so mad now.
Do you see him get upset on the show? He gets legit angry.
Here it is. Other controversial cases West was assigned to, including evaluating Sirhan, who assassinated Robert F. Kennedy at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, June 5th, 1968. West claims Sirhan was the subject of psychic driving, a mind-altering technique involving hypnosis or paralytic drugs. Psychiatrists often use barbiturates for this. Settle the fuck down. You used acid. Stop lying. What is this? Oh, maybe possibly barbiturates or something legal. No, they were using acid.
Who's this West guy?
Jolly West was the head of MK Ultra. He was the guy
no
that
kidding.
that they chronicle extensively in Thomas O'Neill's book Chaos about the Manson case.
Oh, so yeah, my wife is reading that right now.
God damn, that's a good book.
And she has it on audiobook, so I'll walk through the house and I'll hear like, what the
You know how crazy that book is? Tom was Greg Fitzsimmons' roommate in New York. And then also, not roommate, excuse me, neighbor. He was his neighbor in New York. And then also his neighbor in Venice, California. Like he moved, like, so they were like near each other for 20 years. This guy's been working on this. He started working on it as an article, right? So he writes it as an article, but then once he starts getting into the information, it's so extensive, it's so crazy that he can't finish the article because the article is just an anniversary of the Manson assassinations, the Manson killings. So then 20 years later, he finally puts out this book and he's got enough information for another fucking book. And it's wild. It's all a CIA plot. The Manson family Manson was visited in prison by Jolly West. They trained him allegedly in hypnosis techniques using LSD, how to mind control people. He would not do the acid, but he would give the acid to the people, which is something also that apparently the MK Ultra people trained him. And he would get them to commit evil acts. And the whole thing was to discredit the anti-war movement. That's the whole thing, was the hippies. Yeah. So they turned hippies into something fucking terrifying.
7. The Earth is flat. Some still believe the Earth is flat. Joe debates this wild theory with flat Earth advocates.
Obvious, silly stuff on the internet. You know, like there's people that advocate to stopping people that believe in the Earth being flat. Like, well, come on. Like, at what point in time do you just let people believe stuff? At what point in time do you advocate to, like, for the most gullible folks amongst us who have the worst confirmation bias, to like protect them from information?
Well, you know, I have, not to bring it back to me, but my podcast, the guy who edits it is a flat earther. And I haven't been able to convince him.
Well, there's some really convincing documentaries online if you don't know astrophysics and you don't have access to scientists that can debunk each and every claim every step of the way of all these different things. The amount of people that would have to be in on this scam, you would literally need every person who's ever worked on every satellite, every space dish, or every telescope, space telescope, all the people that worked on the Hubble, all the people that worked on all the space travel, everything that's ever been done, every satellite image, everything that we know about the galaxy, everything we know about how we can detect planets by the gravity wobble that they induce in the stars when they go around them. We know so much about,
and so many people know so much that how did you not get that?
And there's so many people involved, and they all universally agree. Everyone involved universally agrees that all planets are round, and there's a specific reason for that. And the size of them that has to do with how much gravity they carry, and the Jupiter protects us from asteroids because it's so big, and we can watch them hit Jupiter. Like, the idea that all that's fake, it seems so wild that people buy into that.
More importantly, why? I always ask them.
Fun.
It's fun?
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to think you know things that other people don't know. It's fun to think that everybody else is a sheep and that you understand the firmament. And there's this big glass cover over the stars, just lights in the sky, and the earth is the center of everything, and God's in control of the whole ride.
Well, then this guy, he's a good editor, and apparently he's having fun.
Well, it's interesting because the mystery itself of the universe is so fucking vast. It's so amazing and so fascinating to think that we really have no idea how big this thing is. And we can look back to like 13 plus billion years, but now they're able to look back further, and they're finding stuff that kind of maybe this is older than we thought it was. Maybe this is bigger than we thought it was. And there's so many calculations involved, and so many people have to go over this. The idea that they're all in on this, and this is just, we're in a fishbowl. It's kind of funny, but hey man, believe whatever the fuck you want to believe, but also, the people, it's funny that there's a lot of people that are really good at a thing and then they believe in the flat earth. Now, imagine someone who went to school for what you go to school for, whether it's audio engineering or coding, and then someone who has no experience in whatsoever, just watched a bunch of wacky YouTube videos, thinks that all coding is fake and that it's all horseshit and we're all already in the matrix and it's all the new world order programming us through fucking avocados or whatever it is. You'd be like, God damn it, I went to school for this. Like people that we all count on to disseminate information to us worked so hard to study through telescopes and satellite telescopes and the Hubble and the James Webb, and they're throwing things into space that have massive fucking lenses on them so we can see deep into the cosmos. And to say that that's all fake and that everybody's involved in it is kind of hilarious.
Well, my editor knows.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, and he knows. And that's what I love about him. I find it actually fascinating.
Imagine, what if he's right? That'd be funny.
And we're all wrong.
It'd be funny if it really was this massive conspiracy. If we go, there's some fucking ancient scrolls that explain the whole thing. And that's really what's going on. And that these scientists are all in cahoots. Always, from the beginning, from Galileo. As soon as Galileo piped up, they go, shut the fuck up.
I love that you have a theory for everything, Joe.
Yeah.
You do. You're like a theorist.
Not really. They're very half-baked, and most of them aren't thought out that well. They're just fun.
Well, you spend time thinking alone in the... yeah. I'm fascinated by you. You're so different than me, but I love listening to you. I love watching you, and I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud that I don't know you that well.
6. Hitler escaped to Argentina. Did Hitler fake his death and flee to Argentina? Joe dives into declassified files and sightings that might rewrite history.
What is Finding Hitler all about? This is a show that you're on, and it's on A&E. Is that what it's on?
Yeah, A&E is the parent network. It airs on History Channel, and we just had our 3rd season that just finished airing.
What's the thought process behind this? Is it legit? Because a lot of people are like, Finding Hitler, get the fuck out of here. They found Hitler, he died.
Yeah, I mean,
not really.
We don't know.
Right.
That's. I mean, this isn't like Ancient Aliens. This is They declassified a bunch of documents. Both the Israelis, the British, and the Germans and Americans in the past 20 years have been consistently declassifying documents. And there were a bunch of specifically FBI documents that we were spending millions and millions of dollars actively searching for Hitler after the war. Yeah, like millions of dollars. Like Hoover was like, no, send more FBI agents to South America, to North Africa, go to the Canary Islands, go to Spain, trying to find out where this guy went. Tons of real FBI documents with real leads, with real informants, some first eye accounts saying that they physically. So anyways, that's the show, is us trying to find out, sift through reality and the fiction of the allure, the mystery of that asshole.
So what's the official story? The official story is that he killed himself, right?
Yep.
He killed himself in the bunker with David Braun.
Yep.
And is there any photographic evidence of his death or anything?
Yeah. So the Russians got the body and they got his skull. And when they brought it back to Moscow, nobody has ever been able to independently verify who and what this body is. They let one genetic test occur, and the body with the bullet holes that they said was Hitler, and have said, and that's the narrative, that's the story, that's all the eyewitness accounts that are even in the vicinity of collaborating with each other, and corroborating each other's testimony. Like the closest version, because none of it seems to be very accurate, is that, okay, here's Hitler's skull. And when they did the genetic testing, it's that of a 35-year-old woman. So like, oh, well, this isn't Hitler, but they've said for the past 80 years that this is Hitler. So, okay, first, before we start throwing stones at Russia, let's go back to 1945, April, in Berlin. You have the Allies coming in, wrecking shop, dropping bombs, blowing everything up they can in every single which way. You have the Russians coming in from the opposite direction. They don't even have enough guns to arm all their soldiers. So if they have 200 guys, or 200,000 guys, they have 100,000 guns. If the guy in front of you dies, you just pick up his gun. That's what's happening in April of 1945 in Berlin. So the noose is tightening. There is no, I mean, it is chaos, anarchy, pandemonium. This is hell on earth, is Berlin, 1945. So I don't know if you could get a real story, the way that we do it now, where we have, this forensic experts that come in and document everything. And we look at all the different testimonies, say, this is exactly how, it's not CSI. This is 1945 Berlin. It's crazy. So I don't know.
So there was no absolute proof.
No.
And a lot of Nazis did escape and go to South America.
The majority of anyone with power. The Nuremberg trials were not a witch hunt, but it was to close a chapter so we could start moving forward with communism. That's what it was. The threat of fascism, the threat of Hitler, the threat of killing all the Jews, the threat of world domination by the Nazis, that threat's gone. What's the next threat?
Communism.
It's communism.
Right.
So that had to be a closed chapter of our history so we could focus our resources and our efforts to what inevitably was going to, the wall goes up. We have East and West Berlin. We're already looking at Korea. This happens almost overnight.
Right. Very quickly.
When Patton's like, no.
5. JFK assassination conspiracy. Was JFK's death a lone act, or a larger plot? Joe dives deep into CIA theories and the mad hiding in the forests of North America. Joe examines the evidence with skeptics and believers alike.
He was Bigfoot. When you see him walk, he's this big old gangly cowboy looking dude. When you see him walk, he walks exactly like that Bigfoot.
You think it was him?
100%.
Huh.
Yeah. They even have a receipt from a fucking gorilla suit that they bought. Have you ever seen him walking side by side? Find a video of Bob Hieronymus walking side by side with the original Patterson footage. So they show the Bigfoot walking and then Bob walking, and you're like, oh. Because he looked like a Bigfoot. The guy was a fucking, there's dudes, the big old cowboy looking dudes, big old fucking farm country strong dudes.
Yeah. They
look like apish. They're just big old fuckers. And this guy was one of those guys. And you see him walking, and he walks right, they superimpose it. They put side by side rather. And when they do it, you go, oh yeah, definitely.
What a disappointment.
Do you want to believe that it's real?
No, I don't want to believe.
Did you ever believe it was real?
When I was 8, yeah.
And when you're 9, you're like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, but my God, there's people to this day, those hardcore Bigfoot people are cult members. They really are. They decide to shut off a part of their brain that critically looks at information.
Aren't there any eyewitnesses who strike you as credible? I was talking to Les Stroud about this. Do you know Les? I was talking to Les once about this, I think.
Yeah, Les, he's a very credible guy in terms of survival tactics. He knows a lot about that. But he didn't see one with his own eyes. He heard something, and he heard noises that sounded chimpanzee-like. Bears make those noises all the time. I've seen bears make those. I've watched bears make those noises. They make them particularly when they're fighting with each other. They sound very much like gorillas. They do that all the time. So if you were alone in the woods and you heard that and you heard smashing and thumping around, you're like, oh my God, there's a gorilla out there. Oh my God, there's some kind of a primate out there. There have been people that have spotted things that are very eerily similar to what you would think is a large bipedal ape. The problem is a lot of these places are heavily wooded and populated by bears, and bears walk on 2 legs all the time. So there's Bob and there's the Bigfoot, right? Case closed, right?
I never saw that.
Look at that dude. Look, isn't he like what I said? Big old country dude.
Yeah.
We see that guy walking and you imagine him with a fucking gorilla suit on. It doesn't even, doesn't even look good. It looks like shit. I mean, look at that thing. It looks like a guy in a gorilla suit. And in my opinion, everything that looks fake is fake. I've never seen anything that looks fake that's real. I mean, I could be wrong. Yeah. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But I definitely know that the guy that there's a whole paper trail of buying a gorilla. Is that what he's saying? That's the suit?
I honestly don't know. I've never seen this video. I was trying to find the side by side. I was having a hard time finding it, and this is the one I picked. And
Okay, so he's saying that that's what he wore. But that thing does look like it. If you go back to that video, that photo of where he's holding up that suit, that looks pretty fucking similar, man. Pretty fucking similar. And all you'd have to do is put that thing on and walk through the woods. And it's just too convenient. All of it's too convenient. That the fact that the guy went looking for it and found it and filmed it, and the whole thing's corny. It's corny.
Data matters.
Data does matter, and there's no real data in terms of genetics. There's been a lot of like goofy talk that they found like some kind of human DNA and samples of hair. The problem with that is all that DNA's been contaminated. I actually talked to an actual biologist about this, and we did an episode of Joe Rogan Questions Everything for the Sci-Fi Channel on Bigfoot. We hung around with Bigfoot hunters. Duncan and I went out with them and looking for Bigfoot and camping with them and everything. And it's people that are just looking for something, and some of them have had experiences. Some of them have said they've seen things, but it's just all of it just reeks of horseshit. And it's unfortunate because I think at one point in time it was real. I think almost certainly at one point in time human beings did interact with Gigantopithecus. It was a real animal. You know about that?
Mm-hmm.
And Gigantopithecus matches exactly like what people talk about when they talk about Sasquatch. It looks exactly like that. An enormous bipedal hominid that was, maybe more than 8 feet tall. And they found out about this thing by accident when a guy was looking in an apothecary shop in China, and he found gigantic teeth that were clearly primate teeth. He's like, where'd you find these? And they go there and they go to the site. They dig out jaw bones that indicate it was bipedal. And so now they know it's a real thing that existed. And I think they date that to, when do they date? I think they date that to 100,000 years ago. When did they date Gigantopithecus to?
Wikipedia says roughly 2 million to 350,000 years.
350,000. I thought it was closer. I thought it was closer to us.
That's just what Wikipedia says. I have to see if there's other disputes or something.
Yeah, see if because I'd read that the carbon date that they did on these teeth. I think they said that was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 and something thousand years ago. So that would put it, with semi-modern looking human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So the question
Very
is,
modern.
right? And then the question is like, how long did it survive? Like, just because you find something, like say if you find one that's 200,000 years old, doesn't mean it didn't exist 100,000 years ago or even 50,000 years ago. Like, when was the last one? When did they die off? And when did humans encounter them? And if you look at their range, like if they found them in Asia, and then you look at the Bering landmass, and you look at where does it drop off? Well, it drops off in the Pacific Northwest. Like, that's like literally like goes down Alaska, makes its way down the coast, dense forest, which is where a thing like that. So proteins extracted from a roughly 1.9 million year old tooth of the aptly named Gigantopithecus is a close relative to modern orangutans. So protein comparisons amongst living fossil apes suggest that Gigantopithecus and orangutan forerunners diverged from a common ancestor between 10 and 12 million years ago.
Jeez.
But when did it die off?
It says the same thing. It says they hadn't found anything from
300,000
the late Pleistocene era. They only have this from the early part of it.
Okay, so it said the fossils date from around 2 million to almost 300,000 years ago. The sizes of individual teeth and jaws indicate that it weighed between 200 and 300 kilograms. That's a big fucker.
4. The Illuminati rules the world, is a secret group controlling politics, media, and pop culture. Joe explores this chilling theory.
We've gotten assistance along the way that we needed it, and we have implemented it globally. This is why those one world people exist, because it's a very powerful concept to have and far too lucrative and beneficial to not be attempted.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to run some global power organization, I would try to co-opt every single leader, try to suck them in, offer support, bring them out to wherever the fuck I have my big ass meetings, fly everybody in private jets, talk about the climate crisis.
All organizations have to follow the same rules.
Yeah, that's wild.
Recruitment is an important facet of all. Like,
we have to get some young global leaders.
Well, understand this is the only reason that we can talk about these big Illuminati-like entities at this period of time. Is just because of time. Like, they aged out. Like, you can't get in new. So everybody got decrepit over there, and they can't exchange really through this period of history. And so that's how we ended up with the Bob Lazars and everything. Throughout history, you could really, it was much easier to get people to not tell nobody.
Right.
As part of your job. You know what I mean?
Imagine going to a World Economic Forum party. What did those freaks do when all the listening devices have been scanned out of the room? All their phones been put into bags and locked away in a lead vault. What do those freaks do? Because you know it's not normal shit. You know everybody's buttoned down like that and wants to control the world. There's something involved that's outlandish that they keep a secret. That's always been the case with secret societies. I mean, that's the whole Eyes Wide Shut thing, that there's some freak shit going on behind the scenes to anybody that really wants to control everything. You don't just want to control everything. You want to control everything so you can get away with some freak shit too.
Right. I'm saying, but these Epstein-like characters have existed throughout history. Whether they were kings or what, like human beings are human beings universally. So everybody is a supplier. Epstein, Weinstein, like these guys knew what these extremists liked and provided it, and provided the way for you to to have $1 billion and not create a fantasy island type environment has not existed throughout history.
Right. And there's always been, those people can only kind of interact with those kind of people. When you reach that certain level of wealth and global success, like you're a Bill Gates type guy, how many guys can Bill Gates hang out with? Bill Gates can't just go bowl and join the bowling team and make friends with the other bowlers. It's too weird. He's got to hang out with his kind. And the more you do that, the less you are in touch with what makes sense to say. And that's when you see them saying the most outlandish shit, because they don't recognize how regular people are going to react to what the fuck you're saying. You know what? We're going to own nothing and be happy. What the fuck did you just say? Did you just say I'm going to own nothing and be happy? So, but there's things. So who owns the things? And who enforces who owns the things? And how do you do that? When you take away everybody's weapons, you're the only one that has weapons, and you get to decide who owns the things. And no one owns the things, and everyone's happy. Okay.
Right. But part of what you're trying to do is you're trying to come up with something that allows you to have the power while also profiting simultaneously. Right. So if it's modern religion, let's say, so in the teaching of Jesus' time, right, when they said pay the tithes, right, it was, you had your whole farming plot. Let's say it was 40 acres and you had corn planted there, right? you would when it came time to harvest, you would harvest everything except the rows that were on the fence, right? And the rows that were on the fence, that was the 10% of your field that would go to people that didn't have it. So it wasn't just you giving the 10%. It was also the fact that human nature is, if you were going to give people some of your crops, you gonna pick out the best crops for you and your family, and then you'll put another pile for the giveaway.
Right.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this took care of that, where it was all equal, and the person that didn't have to feel like they was a beggar. They could come and pick and see which corn they liked and get. You see what I'm saying?
Well, that's a smart move just for harmony in the community too. Then the people have a vested interest in this farmer being successful with his crop.
Right.
Some of that crop is yours.
But the decision to take it from that to God said, give me 10% in this plate is going to make $1 billion a day for 1 billion people.
3. Area 51 and aliens, what's really happening at Area 51? Joe talks with UFO experts about alien sightings and secret government tech.
It is the ultimate
The truth
who
might
knows
shock
question,
you.
but goddamn, I wish more people from S4 would come forth. If Bob really did work with all those people and they really were briefed the same way he was, if we could get more of those people to talk, that would be utterly fascinating.
Well, your show has a big reach, so maybe this time somebody will hear it and come forward.
Did anybody ever reach out to you that claimed to also have worked with Bob at S4?
A bunch, yeah. And
did you verify any of them?
No, you know, they could not be verified, and in fact, I think they were lying to me.
And Bob shoots people down all the time, so that guy's fucking standing on a UFO stage lying bullshit. I mean, you know, so no, he hasn't even. He was hoping one other employee would. However, I have had people that work at Area 51 confirm parts of Bob's story. One in particular saw him coming off the or he says he saw him coming off the Janet flights. I said, will you go on record with me that you met Bob there on the tarmac? No. Why? Everything we did there was confidential. We couldn't even tell our wives. Why would I go on record with you?
And if he did go on record, he'd probably get harassed or arrested or...
Yeah, he can't even tell you what he ate for lunch out there. You know, that so, and one of the guys I was real excited to talk with just recently passed away. He actually started the bar that was at Area 51. So everybody told the bartender stuff. He started as a flower fund because no one would send flowers to wives when people died out there. But my point is, people have come forward to George, to me. A lot of people are lying, but it adds up over time, man.
I got more than 24 people who have come to me with bits and pieces of the story, who had worked out at Area 51 that I confirmed were out there. Security people who had seen a disc under a tarp in a hangar. Different people had worked there at different times, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, who had little pieces of the story, not to confirm Bob. And then there was one that I pursued. I don't know if you want to keep going on this, but sure. I had pursued this guy. I was trying to find in the early 90s people who were in a position to know about what goes on out there, and I found one. And he had been active in the nuclear weapons program. He had worked for EG&G. He had EG&G had the contract to manage Area 51 from the beginning, all the way through the first 30 or 40 years of it. And so I started basically stalking the guy. One of his sons was a state senator, and he had told me, he confided to me, that you got to ask my dad about UFOs and aliens. And another son had been an FBI agent. So I stalked the guy, introduced myself. There were a couple of public events where I would just show up, and he finally got confident enough in me to invite me to his home. And he gets out these scrapbooks, and he's showing me these stories and clippings and photos from the nuclear weapons program. And I'm watching and taking notes and stuff. And suddenly he closes the book and he goes, "You're not here to talk about this nuclear weapons, are you?" I said, "No, not really." And his wife walks in and she says, "Oh, you're not going to tell him that stuff, are you?" And then he started telling me. And then over the course of 2 years, I would meet with him, have a cup of coffee somewhere. I couldn't take notes. I couldn't record anything, but he told me the story. Now, this guy actually is someone that you've had reference to on your show. Remember Annie Jacobson, her book about Area 51?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same guy, but the story that he told me was different than what he told her. He said that they eventually told me that they had a live alien out there. that I could not go public with this until after he died, that they had craft, that it was in a special spot. Originally was at Indian Springs, which is now Creech Air Force Base. And then it was moved to Area 51 when 51 became active. And then there was a very small group that tried to analyze this stuff. They didn't know where it was from. They didn't know how we obtained it. He said this thing was alive, and that they eventually were able to communicate with us, and told me that he was going to make a videotape and he was going to make it available so that after he died, I could have it. Well, suddenly 2 or 3 years later, he totally changes his story. What had happened was there was a congressional investigator. His name was Richard D'Amato, and he worked for Senator Robert Byrd, and he oversaw black budget projects. And he got onto this UFO story from Whitley Strieber. And so he was assigned, find out what the deal is. So he went around the country, talked to different researchers, and came to me and wanted to know about Area 51 and Lazar. So I told him a story, and I told him about this guy. And he got permission for this guy to violate his security oaths and talk to him about it. And they had multiple conversations, and they went to the founders of EG&G, the company, and it became a dead end. But after that congressional inquiry, this guy completely changed his tune. So he made up this story, which is the one that you heard from Andy Jacobson, that what crashed at Roswell was a Russian technology, Nazi technology, flown by the Russians, containing little concentration camp victims who'd been experimented on by Dr. Mengele. Completely ridiculous, story. But I think he got scared. He was a real guy in a real position to know, and had shared with his family some of this information. I think the story that he told me was legit. But if he made the tape, which I think he did, I didn't get it.
How much time has been wasted talking about bullshit? In this subject?
Centuries. Centuries.
That's part of the problem, isn't it?
People just make shit up.
Yeah.
And the more fanciful and ridiculous, the better. Unfortunately, people pay more to hear that and consume it.
I had an operation one time after the Lazar thing, somebody who was targeting me, and he had other people helping him that can convince me that he had worked out there with live aliens. And I'm getting letters from his, supposedly written by his neighbors. Hey, you got to check this guy out. Dr. I'll just say X. He was taken away by armed security in the middle of the night. I think he has something to do with aliens. And from out of the blue, then suddenly I am at a planetarium event, and I'm going to speak about UFOs at some event at this community college. And the guy shows up in a men's room. Hey, my name is Dr. X, standing there at the urinal. You're not doing a story about me, are you? So no, who are you? What? This was a concerted effort to get me to believe that he had worked out there. And it went on for a couple of years. And of course, it was complete bullshit. When I finally did dig into his background, I was able to document where he had worked and what he'd been doing through most of his life. And it was just like a fantasy role-playing thing.
No, I hope it's not.
Really?
Yeah. It's more exciting if it was fake.
Yeah, correct.
It's more exciting to know that something so big could be faked.
1. The moon landing
that
hoax
could
was the
last for so long.
1969 moon landing
Until
faked.
they go back.
Dude,
Joe once questioned NASA's inconsistencies and odd
It
footage.
would be really rough. If we
Could it
found
all
out
have
that the
been
moon
staged to
landing's
beat the
fake.
Soviets?
And there's a lot of people that think it's fake, including a lot of people that have studied it. And then there's a lot of people that think it's real, and a lot of people that know a lot about it.
The cameraman had to have been the first person, not Neil, right?
Well, I think they probably had a camera supposedly set up to capture Neil climbing out of the lunar rover, the lunar lander. But the fun part is that they faked it. The fun theory is that there was no way to get through the Van Allen radiation belts, and that we were in a war with Russia, a Cold War with Russia, to who could get to the moon first, and that we faked it. That's a fun way to say it.
What does news stand for? Isn't news
news? The word news?
Yes, sir. Isn't that an acronym?
What is it?
National and entertainment. I know it's entertainment. Some entertainment. Why do I keep seeing a dude right there with no clothes on?
Oh, that's Elon Musk. That's this dude Beeple. He's a digital artist. He created this NFT, and it also has a digital art. It's like
a swole
Giga Chad. It's like super swole. Elon Musk, once AI allows you to edit your body.
I seen this AI of Elon Musk, and he was like, "No, notable events." What?
Notable events, weather, and sports. That's what it is.
I guess. Some people don't agree with that too.
Oh, they don't agree?
I mean, there's.
Okay, the world news has been claimed to be an acronym of the 4 cardinal directions: northeast, west, and south. However, the old spelling of the words varied from nevis, 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 neus. Huh. So what's the origin of the word then? It's not an acronym. Okay, people think news is an acronym, but it's not.
It's not.
Oh, okay. It makes sense. It's like, what's new? What's new? What's going on that's new? What does news mean? It stands for a notable event. Oh, it says that. That says it's said. Verify. Yeah, no, it's not. Okay.
Who should I trust? For
Collecting of new events is referred to news. No, I think that's what it is. I think it's new events. Is an acronym. See, it says there. Okay. No, the claim. That's Snopes. Okay. I think it's just what's new.
That's crazy.
But people always make acronyms out of things, you know?
Yeah. Harry Eve Butt, the HEB.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Here, everything's better. That's what HEB is supposed to be.
Yep.
Yeah. People do that all the time with stuff. And they also do it because it makes them sound more intelligent.
Correct.
You know? Pretend that this. Do you know what it really means? You know?
My cousin Romeo, that motherfucker, he be getting my stupid ass all the time, but he'll make words up, and that motherfucker, like, he just make it sound so real.
He commits.
Bro, I'll be like, oh yeah, for real. He be making me think like, damn, I gotta buy a new part. You know what I'm saying? Fucking Romeo, punk ass. I love that motherfucker, man. I love my family, bro.
Well, one of the things I really like about you is how much you credit people and how much you talk well about people, and you know you're really interested in elevating people around you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
bro, I've been digging the dirt, bro. Like I know what it's like to be nobody and loved by nobody. You know what I'm saying? And that shit, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. You know, like it's good being lonely. I like being lonely. You know what I'm saying? Give you time to think. You can fucking figure shit out. You know what I'm saying? People are headaches sometimes too. But being lonely is fuck that. You know?
Being lonely forever is the worst place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need each other. That's what we were talking about earlier. Like, to be the only person who's doing well is crazy. You don't want to be that.
Yeah, fuck that.
That's a terrible place to be.
Yeah.
And then you're surrounded by people who are mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck that.
All I want to do is just make friends, bro. Like, everywhere I go, people love me, but because like I come correct. You know what I'm saying? I treat them good. I make them feel. People only start hating when they feel excluded.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Bro, you give that motherfucker a broom and tell him to go sweep and he gonna be happy.
That is true. People feel mad.